in, and that was the complete opposite of what happened. And I decided to tell them at 4 weeks. As soon as I found out, I was excited, and I just assumed I was going to go to work, and everyone else is going to be super excited too. And so whenever I went in and I told my lieutenant and sergeants, they just kind of looked at me and they're like, well, what do we do now? And I was like, well, I have no idea. I guess I wanted to be off the street immediately because I didn't want to take any type of chances or, anything to happen. And so what ended up happening was we had a CID sergeant at the time that said, well, I'll take her. And so I was able to work light duty, which is where it all started for everyone else to go into CID and do detective work. So
something that I don't think either of y'all have experienced, I could be wrong, because I think both of you were in CID when it became that, but as far as pumping on duty, which I have no idea about, I do know that something that did come up in our department was having a area for y'all to go that was private and comfortable. I know there was some, what's the word? Some people weren't excited about the fact that we were getting a mini fridge in our locker room, even though it was for breast milk. So I personally, it didn't even have anything to do with me, encountered some guys who thought it was not fair, and I chewed their butts. I mean, it's something that we don't think about until we have to do it. And so what have you encountered? Have you gotten any negative reactions, I guess, to having to step away to breastfeed? I mean, people still take smoke breaks, so I would think that there's not much of an argument there, but how has that process been?
So yeah, luckily whenever I came back, I was already in the CID position, had gotten that position. So it was easier, I guess, if you will, rather than being on patrol, like more power to the women that are on patrol, like I cannot. But I took a break every 4 hours, and like I said, I was super fortunate. Like I had an alarm set on my phone, and I remember several times one of our other detectives, he would like hear my phone go off, and I could put something, and he'd be like, "Hey, your alarm's going," and I really like caught on to what it was that we saying. Hey, it's time. Yeah, and he's like, "Hey, your phone went off," and I was like, "Thank you."
They're probably afraid it's going to start. Don't handle that.
So we mentioned the fridge in our locker room, and we had the opposite where the guys, before we had the fridge, were having to put it in break room. And so the guys were disgusted by that as well. So you got half of them that were disgusted and being ridiculous and immature about having to put it in the break room. And then you have the other ones that are upset because now we get our own fridge.
Well, I will say this too, with the COVID thing, we kind of had to split our patrol operations. Building. I forgot about, I had a female that just was coming back from maternity that needed that accommodation over there. So I just want the Home Depot modern day fridge. Because, I mean, to be honest with you, I'm not done. You need to make sure those are taken care of. And actually, your sergeants, kudos to them, setting her up in a nice room, and you got all that stuff fixed for her. And
Because I was off whenever you brought the fridge.
Yeah.
And so they're sending me photos of the whole room that they set up.
These are set sergeants.
I think the sign outside ended up being the milk factory. And she's a good sport about it, so.
She did very well to accommodate for her without even needing that. And I was very proud of that they went out and did that. Because that strides from where we were back when you guys were both.
Well, I think, talking about kids, there's a lot of us up here who do have kids. How, y'all more recently, Jamie, I think, how James just turned 2? One. So he's relatively new. Me and Melissa have some that are a little bit older. And then obviously Pat, you're adult, and I think you have.
I have grandkids now.
Yeah, exactly. So how did that change your perception of your job, I guess, or how, like you were talking about being in a pursuit before, I'm sure it was all fun and games, and then the weight of that, how did it change how you worked or conversations that were had at home?
I wouldn't say it changed how I worked in conversations I had at home. I'll say I'm thankful that I'm now in a CID role, and I don't want to say that's less dangerous. But the reality of it is I'm in an office and I'm not out on the street in a patrol car. And so, yeah, I mean, it's end of the day operations, I would say it's safer, and I'm thankful for that because having my husband in law enforcement as well, it's nice that, you know, one of us has a, you know.
Melissa, as your kids have gotten older, do you find yourself, I know when I started in patrol, the girls that was there mostly, and then we adopted 3 boys, and they only knew me in CID. So when they started to see me go to work in uniform, we had to have those conversations about the difference. Obviously, not a lot of the bigger conversations, but I know it made me think about it more. So your kids are kind of the same age, and you've been in CID and then gone back to patrol. Are those ongoing conversations in your household about what you then do for work?
Well, I think they're so used, that's all they know. And so the job itself is not scary to them. It was every time I promoted, I went back to nights. So then they were upset that I would be working at nighttime. And then I would have enough seniority, then I would be able to go to days or whatever I want to community services. And then I promote again and I go back to nights. So I think the functionality and not being there for the bedtimes and not being able to take them to practices and go to their games, because now I work every other weekend again. The functionality part, that was a lot tougher, but really just not being there at night, that was tough.
So we talked, I can't remember the chief from Folsom, Renault. I should have apologized. Yeah, you were awesome. I'm sure she's watching right now and taking notes. She talked about work-life balance. And a lot of times it's always interesting to me when we have people talking about work-life balance. You usually get two different sides of it. Like you can do everything and make it work. And the other side, which she presented, was you're never going to make everybody happy 100% of the time. So just be good with it. And that's something that I deal with as the mom guilt. And Jamie, I know you've got a little one at home now, so it's probably something new for you, just trying to spread your time. Have you found a way to have those conversations with your spouse, and how is that something that's changed for you?
I think my schedule is so pretty much set, and I've been on the same schedule for the last 6 years, being at the range full time. So she knows what to expect when it comes to department calls, either recruit training or she understands. But it's completely different now, having to think, that she's going to be the only one home with him, little things for me. It's not so much is my job scary. I work in the range. I'm fairly confident, but it made me realize I need to make sure I train people even better now. So that's more, kind of where I come from is, the hardest thing is my wife's a teacher. Now that this year, so it's not my line of work. It's her line of work that has put a shift on our household schedules and functionality.
Pat, were there any specific calls or big incidents that you dealt with that you've had to explain to your kids after the fact, or maybe even the situation they've been in where that dynamic, where the reality of what just happened kind of sets in and needs to be discussed?
Well, my husband was in law enforcement as well, so I think that it was kind of like yours. They grew up with that. They didn't think about that as much. And we didn't have as many things that are happening as are happening now, where you have things where people are being, assaulted sitting in a car. I think that to me is the harder thing to explain now. At your kid's age, we didn't have to think about stuff like that.
And it's out now on social media.
Oh, yeah, and everything's on TV, so you see all those things firsthand. And I think that must be the most frightening thing for little kids. Dealing with that part.
How are y'all spouses dealing with all the recent ambushes? I know every time I talk to Brittany and she gets on in the car, she's like, aren't you in your bubble? I have to get out of the office every once in a while.
My wife is the same way. I can tell you a story too. So we had an incident, this was, I don't know, a couple months ago, and it was a shooting. We were looking for a suspect. And she texted me. She said, so are you coming on time? It's always the 4:30 text. Are you coming on time? It's usually no, I'm sorry. She knows to text me. And then I text her back that I was looking for a guy. And I've been thinking after even 20 years, I should have known better. Looking for a guy with a gun. That's what I said back. Right. So I thought, to me, well, that's Comments?
It's just-
She knows, she is, right? But she's so used to, my job being almost indoors, she doesn't expect me to send that back to her. And I did not appreciate that. So when I sent it to her, I didn't even think about it until I got home. And she made me, recognize very quickly, yeah, very quickly, that, we still worry even after 20 years or even
Yes.
after, 15 or 20 years, whatever it may be. And don't take that for granted, because I did that day, and I felt horrible. I realized it when I got home. And that's something that, again, because I don't want to put her in that worried position, even when I'm 25, 30 years in. You got to realize our chief, who's got plenty of years in, I don't even remember how many he said, 38 years, was chasing the bad guy with a gun a couple months ago. So we still get out and we still do those kind of things. We're the size where we have to do that sometimes. I cannot take that for granted anymore. I felt horrible. And, she made me recognize really quickly that was not the problem. I should be sending next time. So anyways,
Well, I remember when we were on patrol together, Tiffany, and we chased that guy down on the highway that was shooting at you. And we had kind of had time to process it. I mean, I don't know how you were feeling. I was like 17 cars back and my anxiety was up, but I remember we were in the PD getting ready to debrief and Chase came in. I don't know if he was working that night.
Yeah.
So her husband is a U.S. cop. And I wanted to hug him. Because I was like,
you're here for me.
I don't know, because my anxiety was high because something happened to you. I can't imagine how he was feeling. So how did that dynamic?
Yeah, so I remember that I called him and told him, I was like, hey, just kind of pursuit, we got shot at, no big deal, right? And he's like, all right, I'm on my way. I'm like, no, you're working, what's the problem? Yeah, just another day. And I pull in the parking lot and there he is, I'm like, oh God, here's my husband, everybody, But yeah, I remember he said, are you okay? And I was like, I'm good. I appreciate you checking on me. And a few minutes later, I come back to work, but.
So it was more traumatic for me than me.
Yeah.
Karen, you're married to a cop. How did those things happen in y'all's house? Are you all pretty much on, you're good, I'm good, or is it an ongoing conversation?
Yeah, well, I'm on the street and my wife is not, so it's different for her now. I have a Life 360 app that I found added to my phone. So every once in a while, if I'm not in my bubble, I get a text, hey, why are you at so-and-so place? What you doing? Oh, I want to call. I call, type thing. I realized because I've never been inside that she's got the added stress, even though she's done the job, she's been on the street, she's now in a position to where she doesn't go out on the street anymore. So, I can't like you say, hey, yeah, it's got a gun, because then the radio comes on. I remember back in 17, I was in a critical incident, I was a commander of a critical incident, and I didn't have time to talk to her all day before I got 360. And somebody texted her and said, hey, your wife was handling a pretty significant incident, are you okay? And she was like, what? And, went and got her radio, turned her radio on. She said she listened to the whole incident. I get home until midnight. She said she dropped on the floor on her knees. This is a woman who's done this job for 11 years, and for that, to do that makes me realize even more that I need to be careful what I say. If you're watching this, I don't always tell you everything. So that's out of the bag. But, as part of that, and you don't realize just how much, you share together, even though you're in separate assignments.
What about you, Melissa?
I think it's actually been really beneficial because we can come home and talk to each other and tell each other every single detail, and we can get that off of our chest. Or because of us supervisors, we can talk about supervising different employees, and I constantly am asking them, well, what are you looking? Well,
My wife's not a cop, but she tells me what I should do.
Well,
That's why I'm like,
that's probably a good thing. But we can bounce ideas off each other, and because, he is, in SWAT team, and so he's been on SWAT for a long time, so especially like in the tactical situations, I'll tell him, hey, this is what I did, would you have done anything different? Or, we discussed this, and how would you approach that? So for me, it's been extremely helpful, and then for him, he said it's extremely beneficial for him as well, because he's not going to be emotional at work, of course, and so he's going to come home and he can get all of that out, and so it's been great.
How do you guys deal with the stress of the job at home? I mean, working out, that's the answer. But seriously, is there something that y'all do that you found helps you decompress? I know there's been a lot of talk, our keynote speaker who wasn't able to come this year, obviously, but we're hoping to have next year. She got a YouTube video on mindfulness, and she talks about not meditation. Meditation, if you need medication,
It's okay too.
But are there techniques that I've tried the meditation thing and I usually fall asleep or start thinking about everything I have to do, so that doesn't work for me.
I do think, and you talk about the cliche of working out, but I even if Tracy and I just go for a walk, even if we just get outside, and we've got to do that every day that we're off, we've got to do something. And of course, when COVID hit, things were unknown, and, civil unrest and all that kind of stuff kind of started to hit us all at one time. Working out for me was probably the biggest thing. I worried about when I didn't feel like working out, when I didn't want to go do it. I knew at that point to force myself to do it because you kind of have to do it, especially when it's an unknown variable as we have over the past couple of years.
Rachel, what do you do?
Well, I have expensive hobbies. I used to have a deer lease, but a lot at the family drama, but I found that getting away for those 2 or 3 days to go hunt. So what I tell my people is you got to have a thing. So what's your deer lease? So for me, it was going out in the woods for, every other weekend or spending a couple weeks around Thanksgiving hunting. And so since I lost the lease, I had to find something else. So I bought a kayak earlier this year. And so I go out
Tracy,
and kayak, yeah, and I fish and I take the dog with me and then my dog, I love my dog, so you gotta have.
Go ahead, Yoda, shout out.
Yoda, yeah.
He's watching.
He's Yoda watching, Yoda the healer. And I always hashtag it Yoda the healer, HELER, and then HEALER because she's healer and she's a healer. So you need to have whatever it is, whatever your deer lease is about. My mother habits gardening. For me, it's doing stuff like that, or I even like puttering in the garage. But you gotta find some. And then I actually do like the meditation stuff. I got turned on to that earlier this year. I use the Calm app a lot, and if you fall asleep, it means it's working. So yeah, and then having someone to talk to really helps too. So, yeah.
Well, I think communication is a huge part of this. It's what Melissa was talking about. Sometimes you don't want to talk about some of those things, but if you don't talk about it, then it's even more trouble. My husband, he retired from the PD and then he went to the DA's office, and his job was a computer examiner. He was a forensic computer examiner. So most of what he was doing was child sexual abuse. That's stressful. That is very stressful. But I had to listen to what he was saying because I was afraid that if I didn't listen to what he was having, issues with there, that would become internalized and cause him more difficulties. Now, I could tell you this, because I know he's not watching. There were some of the things he would tell me in my head, I was going, and I was going, no. Because it was just that bad. But he had to talk about it. So it was get it out there to make sure that it didn't fester and become an issue. So I think communication is huge, but meditation is great. If you can get the time and the quiet time with a 1-year-old would probably not be good.
One thing I found, and I was showing her some Snapchat earlier. I have a great niece, so my nephews are old enough now that one of them has a child. So thank God for technology and social media, because they live in Panhandle, and so I don't get to see them. But through technology, I'm able to watch them on Snapchat. So for me, sometimes during the day, I get a Snapchat notification. Her name's Riley Lou, so shout out to Riley Lou. And they'll be, we were watching her try to drink the straw, drink from the straw out of Dr. Pepper can, and that brief just connection with something not related to work. Yes. Yeah.
And on that note, we play a lot of golf, to kind of get in. We have kind of rules, like you can talk about work up until this time, and after this time, no more work talk. You said it sits in your head, and when you lay down and stuff and everything. And we just try to surround ourselves with people outside of the profession.
Yeah.
Because I find that helpful. We have 2 very close friends who have nothing to do with law enforcement. They have very successful careers, and it's just something that our paths would never cross. But golf crossed our paths, we met just playing golf random day, and we're all the best of friends. And they don't ask a whole lot of questions about law enforcement because they, they're like, just making sure we're safe and stuff, but they're not like, asking all kinds of questions. And it's good because it's good to just talk about other things. And I don't love you ladies, but you have other, you know what I'm saying?
You
Sometimes
need
it's
that,
good to
you need
just
that.
have somebody that has nothing to do with your job, has no idea what anything is, or what your acronyms are, your weird sense of humor, stuff, so,
Unhealthy thoughts.
So what do you do, Pat? I would pose this question to you, Rachel, and Carrie probably, and Carrie, I don't know how long you've been.
I'll be 23 years in January.
Okay, so you as well. We talk a lot, especially at our conference, about burnout. People hit the point of burnout, but aren't in a position where they can retire or don't actually want to walk away yet, but they need something to pull them out of that funk. What, have you ever experienced that? And what would you suggest to help get over that?
No, I'll be honest with you, I don't feel, but I'm not on the street right now either. In my position at the academy, I'm around young people all the time. It's a lot more motivating to be around young people and see them develop and that. And so it's a fresher feeling. So I don't think I get the same kind of feeling as repetitive. I'm going here, to this call, to that call, to that call. So I don't really feel a burnout. I probably should have retired by now, but it's like an umbilical cord you can't cut. You just keep going like this and it's saying, no, I love this job. I love this job. So, I don't feel that, but I'm not in the position that some of these other people are in. So.
And then dealing with somebody, one of your people. That's one thing I struggle with is dealing with somebody who is clearly burnt out, but
Yes.
we gotta work. So what are we gonna do to?
I think part of that is ensuring that you keep things fresh. And what I mean by that is, as I started approaching my 5-year mark, and this is very common for officers around that 5-year mark to be like, okay, I got this down, what else am I going to do? And I think I was very fortunate at the agency where we had different opportunities. So when I felt that coming on, I saw different opportunities. And it just kind of stars kind of lined up. So for me, it was the crime scene. So I did that for a few years. Absolutely loved that. And then promoted to the rank of sergeant. And once I hit sergeant, I knew that I was, in my eyes, this is what I was meant to do. I was meant to lead people. So then you think about it and lead people at different levels now. So I changed my tune by trying to promote different levels, trying to promote. And then of course, the biggest thing is mentoring. So when we started this venture, I could talk mentoring all day. No, I can't. Like if I could do that all day, 24/7, I'd be happy. So doing things fresh, starting things new, and realizing that I'm not going to be productive at my agency if I don't. So taking forth and putting forth that effort to do that, sure. I don't know what you like.
I would agree with that. I tend to go to the position and stay there and try to be the best at what I can be at that. And then one of my mentors taught me try to leave it in a better place than when you got there. So I try to do that. And so when I find myself reaching maybe that burnout phase, that I'll try to add something to it, like I need more on my plate. But to just to keep it fresh. There's our department. You have opportunities to work. We have specialized units. Sometimes that can be hard to get to, but there's collateral duties that you can volunteer for. So like for me, I was in SRT when I had the opportunity to come here, and I was confident what I did in SRT. And like you, when I made sergeant, I'm like, oh my God, why did I wait so long to do this? And so this was a good way to keep it fresh for me because, okay, I might be old and jaded in my ways, and I'm a butt chewed away from being able to retire. But it makes me, like, it gives me a mission. Say, here's the things that I went through. Here's the things I overcome. Here's the things that I know that you can do.
Right.
And I want to help you succeed and do
Yes,
this.
and that goes with the mentoring. That's why you're here with us right now. It's because you understand that. So for me too, the other side, when I talk about mentoring, to keep things fresh, maybe I'm not the one that promotes, but maybe I drive someone else to do that.
Exactly.
And whether it's my agency or another agency, that gives me. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So
So talking about promoting and the drive to promote for those ladies or guys who are watching, who are considering promoting, or it's definitely what they want to do in the next couple of years. would you say that it's better to be sort of a jack of all trades or to be the subject matter expert, find something you're really good at it and stick to it?
I do think it benefits you to have a healthy grasp on everything, almost. So for me, it was by the time I was in the lieutenant position, I had time training, learn TCOL and learn training coordinator things. I also learned a little bit about licensing and things like that. On that other note, I had to worry about the entire agency and my ability to help train them. That was a global view of that. And then when I did crime team too, that's another thing. I learned a little bit about CID. So when I started hitting the street, of course SWAT too, 10 plus years of SWAT. So when you hit the street, I felt pretty confident. Now I screwed up all the time, don't get me wrong, but I felt pretty confident in my abilities. So sometimes I do think, you know, and I hate to waver on that question, but I do think it benefits you to have a grasp on a lot of things. But at the same time, if that particular unit that you're trying to promote to has a specialized formation to it, or CID, maybe a sergeant, and that's what you're gearing yourselves to, having CID experience specifically is going to help you stand out. So it's, you know, I hate to say both.
And yeah, I would agree with her, because I've done a lot of fun things in my career. I've done blessed career. I've done, you know, patrol, traffic, DWI squad, bike patrol, training academy, you know, and different things like that. And having an SRT was a blast. But the job I'm in now is one of the hardest jobs I've ever done. It has challenged me personally, professionally. I'm starting to crime position over it now. So that was a very big learning curve. But because of all the other things that I've done in the department and the network and the connections that I have, that when something happens that, you know, I need to reach out to talk help on a warrant, hey, JC, you know, can you help me out? Because I have those connections. So, and also when my detectives come to me with a question about something, because of I've kind of done a little bit of everything, I'm able to say, well, from my experience over in this unit, I can tell you this is the way you need to do it or that. So I think it helps to be well-rounded, but if there's a thing that is your thing and you want it to be your thing, man, just go for it and be the best. You want to, you know, be a crimes against children detective, be the best one you can be and get as much out of it. And if that's what makes you satisfied, and you know, whatever it is that feeds your ethos, go for it, stay there. So it's kind of a personal thing, I guess.
The only downside of that, and if there's a view of things, then when you're evaluated, because one of the things that I do is assessment centers. And people who have a more expansive view of an agency have more to contribute in that respect. But those who have a passion, it comes through. So if you are the best that there is in that particular area, then you usually do very well when you're addressing that particular area, and you can promote yourself that way while you are talking to that assessment panel and highlight all the good things you've done in that particular area. The only hard thing is when you have people, like I said, from the outside assessing, they want to see experience.
Right.
And they want to see it in a varied idea, you know, a very areas instead of just one particular area. So that's the downside, would be but the passion comes through in the person. And if you've got a passion for something, that's one of the things that carries you through those kinds of assessment centers anyway. Whether it's just a, you know, microcosm of what you've done, or, you know, or an expanded thing, just passion. You need passion.
And knowing once I got into leadership, that's what I wanted to do. I was very thankful for the paths that I chose, but I gotta be honest, I didn't choose them to be where I'm at today. I chose them because I wanted to change things up. And actually it was very beneficial, to me, because I was able to gain that knowledge and, you know, find out what my niche was. So.
Pat, you sit on a lot of assessment boards, or you have, Melissa on Thursday, she's sitting on Carrie's a lot, Rachel on mine. When y'all.
Yeah, it's your fault.
That's $20.
Well paid.
So when y'all are on the other side of the table, whether you're talking about, for a specialized unit, even a promoted sergeant or lieutenant, or even you may have had some, opportunities to have a part in some chiefs interviews. What would your advice be for those? What are y'all looking for? Like, what's the best way to prepare?
One of the things you've got to do is prepare. Don't go in cold on anything. Know a little bit about everything. But the biggest thing that I've seen people really screw up on is when they try to address things at the level they're at as opposed to the level they're trying to go to. So they're answering questions as a patrol officer instead of a sergeant, or they're answering questions as a sergeant instead of a lieutenant. And those who have never been a chief before, and I've seen some of them crying pretty bad as well. They don't look at it from the perspective of more holistic for the whole agency. And so it's preparing, big time preparing, but also make sure that you're addressing the stage you're going to, and to have the confidence to say, this is what I would do in this position, not what I would do in the position I'm currently in. Does that make sense to you?
Oh, yeah, you're gonna get a phone call from me.
Maybe what would suggest coming to our preparing for promotion class offered in the 2021. We are fortunate to have that, and her experience and knowledge we offer, preparing for promotion class, which, has traditionally been 4 hours, but we're open to stretching out to 8 hours. But I'd encourage everybody, I know I'm probably obnoxious when I'm about to look for something. I sat at Melissa and Ben's kitchen table and racked her brain, multiple conversations with Carrie, I've talked to Rachel, I've annoyed Pat, hey, I've got a work coming up, ask me questions. So I think we want to be an asset for you guys. I think we try really hard to put ourselves there so that you can ask us questions, but I know everyone up here would be very receptive to emails, phone calls, Facebook messages. We're all administrators on the page or have access to an administrator. So use us as a resource because we use each other as a resource, and that's part of the reason that this whole thing kicked off today was we wanted to make sure that we had FaceTime with everybody this year, just like we have in years past.
I think the biggest thing, the biggest lesson for females to take in when they're talking about promoting is, golly, be confident in yourself. Be confident in yourself, because when I sit on the other side and I'm judging you based on what you're telling me and how you're answering questions, if you show me that you're confident, like Kendra, for instance, in her sergeant's work, confident as can be, just perfect, and not perfect, not perfect in that, very, very well done, very confident in her abilities. And I think that we need to start doing that, because I don't think males have a very difficult time with that. I think they're comfortable being that way. That's just how they are. And the reality is we need to also learn from that too. And learn that we can be that just as confident in whatever it is that we're seeking to get.
Well, we don't want to be braggers.
No,
And you have to, you have a certain amount of
it's not
humility.
natural for us.
No, it's not.
Yeah.
And you have to put yourself out there. It's a competition.
Yes.
And most of the jobs that we are competing for as women are against not other women, but they're mostly men, because predominantly the people in that pool are going to be men. So you have to have confidence and that, again, that fire in your belly to say, I'm putting myself out there.
You have to show that, not that they're not good enough for the job, but there's no doubt in that person's mind, you're the best person. You are the best person for that job. Sometimes we don't show ourselves enough. And I think that if we just improve on that and think, okay, I got to prove to them, I got to show them that I am the best candidate, not that they're not, but I am the best candidate. And kind of flip it around.
And it doesn't make you arrogant, it just makes you sellable. You
One of
have to
the-
be sellable.
Kendra and I went to the Nolly conference last year. I think it was Janine Driver that said this, was fake it till you make it. And what one of the things was, one of the big takeaways I took from that was that when, let's say that there's a certain position open patrol and there's a female and a male that are both wanting to do this, the male will, he doesn't even care if he's qualified to do the job. I'll put in for it, I don't care. Where women have a tendency to I'm not gonna put into the job till I know I'm 100% ready. And you know what? You don't have to be 100% ready, because you'll learn, you make mistakes, and that's okay. That's how you learn. But make it till you make it, and I cannot stress enough, be confident in that interview. Why? You need to pick me, because if you don't pick me, this department's just gonna fall apart. Amen.
Don't say that.
Don't say that.
I think there's a fine art to the humble brag. And
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
I have some guys who are putting in for CID this week who will be competing against Tiffany. And we talked about that, one of them is very humble, but he's a hard worker, excellent, but I know that this is the ongoing conversation, I know you're gonna go in there, and you're gonna be very humble, very respectful. You have to shine, like that, they're gonna ask you the questions, and everybody gets asked why you, and you have to, in that moment, list it off. And something that I do is write down all of the reasons why me, and I try to drive the oral board. So if you ask me a question about X, I'm gonna find some way to fit in something on my list with every question.
Yeah, put yourself a theme to that board if you can. So you go into that board. For me, it was servant leadership, I think on the last one, and one prior to that was transformational leadership. That's the theme I stuck with. So whenever I was asked a question, I would gear it around that type of leadership, that type of beliefs, and those type of ideologies. I do think that if you could burn a hole in their brain about what kind of leader you are, it'll be helpful in the long run. So, and I tell that to everybody that I know that tries to promote. I think I've told Melissa that a couple times about seeing her board boards out, because one of the things that Melissa does not think about it, going to the tennis board, she knocked it out of the park. And I knew, and I was just being a monitor, but I knew when she left, I'm like, oh hell, she just knocked it right out of the park. Because she went in there with confidence. She was in a wheelchair at the time.
I know, talk about feeling
And
weak.
they just-
She wheels me in, I'm like, let me do it.
That's the key. Well, you never have, you don't get a second chance to make a first impression.
Well,
You got to be there up front, right?
this is like one of the only opportunities in your life when you're going before a board that you have to tell them that you're the best.
Yes.
This is the one time where it's okay to be the best, because if you don't think you're the best, why would they pick you?
Right.
I tell all my guys and girls this, that if you go in there and they say, well, why you, or who else would you pick?
No one?
And that's the thing, that is the real answer, is this is your time to shine, so you better be shining as hell.
You gotta believe it.
Yeah, you have to.
Yeah.
But I think one thing that messes people up is whenever they try to act like someone else.
Yeah.
You have to be true to yourself, because that's where you're gonna feel the most confident. And if, my personality, like, is very different than anyone I've ever boarded against. And so I'm most confident whenever I'm just myself. And if I always took it as, if I didn't get picked then for being myself, then they didn't want me. And so why would I want to pretend to be someone else to get promoted whenever I need to be true to just me?
So we kind of got off the personal relationships, but we got a question from Lori King. Hello, Lori. Thank you for joining us today. One of the questions she wanted to know is who here is married to someone who's not in law enforcement? If so, what are the challenges you faced trying to build a relationship or realizing there's this huge disconnect? Because if you're not doing it, there's empathy there, but you can never truly understand the things that we see and what we deal with.
Sure. My wife, she was in the military, so that helps. But we've had some hard years where I would come home and, hey, tell me about your day. And I'm like, leave me alone. I need to decompress. So, I get home from work and I need about 30 minutes just to chill, go sit on the couch, get my iPad, and just veg for about 30 minutes and just decompress. And then we're good to go. And so then I also have to always send especially when I was an SRT, if she knew I was gonna run a warrant, after the warrant, I would just send a text, hey, I'm A-okay. And even in CACU, I still do that. If she knows we're running a search warrant, I'll send the text, I'm A-okay. And then I've learned the hard way not to, like you were saying, say those offhanded stuff, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. When Pierce was shot a couple years ago, I was one of the first supervisors on the scene, and I'm trying to get all my gear on, and I know that it was gonna be on the news, so I sent a text like, I'm okay. I'm out here, but I'm okay. Well, she didn't see the text for like 3 hours, and then everybody's like, is Rachel okay? Is Rachel okay? She's like, I don't know what you're talking about, And we were out there for 4 or 5 hours, but I had taken the time to send that text. And so you have to just be able to communicate and listen, and then be aware of their fears and concerns. But she doesn't dwell on it, because if she does, she knows she will just go nuts.
Yeah, you're married to a school teacher. So
Yeah.
what you got to add?
I think the biggest thing was for her when we first started dating, when I was in control, just the unknown.
Yeah.
And then after 6 years now, for the majority of the time, I've been at the range. So it does get easier, me being at the training academy. with COVID, I had to go back to patrol. That put everybody in my family, not only her, into a frizzy, knowing that I had to go back. But like everybody said, it's communication. I know for her, she just can't think about it. So,
Who asked the question? Lori? Lori, if we didn't answer it, IM me, and we can get a conversation going.
I think communication is the biggest, kind of for Brittany and I, we kind of had to, she would get frustrated because I was clearly bothered by, usually it's when I was in city, not necessarily the scary part. That's a whole other conversation, but the stress, and when I was in CID, I'd come home very stressed out and all that, and she could tell it was bothering me, and she would want to talk about it, like talk it out of me. And so after a couple of years, we got to the point where she'd be like, "You're okay? Yes, I'm okay. This happened. I don't want to talk about it. I'll be fine, leave me alone." And she got to the point because she would also sometimes, she may not have been, she's not watching it, she's at football practice. But I would talk to Carrie about it, and then she would get all butthurt because I'm talking to Carrie and not her. And it's just a matter of you understand where I'm coming from, and also we're close enough where you know what I need to do. We went met at the gym with no conversation about what happened, just work out, get it out, and not be at home. And so I think whatever that is between you and your significant other, if you can just come to an understanding of, when I say I'm okay, I need you to accept that, and we maybe can readdress it at a different time or come back to it. But I think whatever that looks like for you, just make sure there's something there so that if what's going on is going unsaid, at least they know you're okay. And you can have some sort of agreement that something's bothering me, but you can't fix it. So
I think it's different, a little different for me too, because Tracy was in the Air Force for so many years, and then she got out and became a nurse, eventually through all that. So her stress level, especially during COVID, we were both almost on the same level, stressing about certain things. And she would get on her 4 o'clock COVID meeting, and I'd get on my 4 o'clock COVID meeting. And so we actually had a very good understanding of communication, very open about things. She was deployed 3 or 4 times overseas during, Iraqi freedom and things like that. So I had the ability to come home and kind of describe those things to her. So I was very fortunate at that. And I do experience it though. I'll come home and, how was your day? And that kind of thing. She can feel me get agitated, but the reality is she knows how to talk to me to get it out, I guess. And that's because we've been together for 20 years.
we have one more question that came in, kind of go back to the maternity leave policy. So Whitney works for a city that they don't have paid maternity leave, so she has to use her own vacation or sick time. I know we've got a couple different agencies represented up here, and then some of us have gone to different caucuses where it's conversation. Do y'all have any policy at your department that cover that we were anywhere, Pat, maybe that that would be a resource if someone was looking to broach that with their administration and maybe start a policy or start the conversation?
Well, one of the things you can do is start with the ADA, information on pregnancy, as a disability per se,
Okay.
and know what those facts are, because there are certain things within that ADA policy that allow for a person to retain their employment, even if they have complications like preeclampsia and things that are related to pregnancy. First thing I do would be get my ducks in a row, find out what the law says, and then go find some model policies, because there are policies that are out there for many agencies, and find the model policies and see if there's some way you can work those into your agency policy. But prepare first. Get your ducks in a row before you go and approach somebody who's the policy maker per se and say, this is what I see out here. This is what I know is allowable. What can we do? Instead of demanding things, but just say, what can we do to work through this and find the best solution for our agency? It's going to be harder for small agencies.
And if there's anybody out there who's listening that has either helped get a policy started in their department or has one that's very good, or has one that is complicated, send it to us if you're cool with it. We can get in touch with Whitney and share that with her. Again, that's part of this is the networking and helping facilitate those issues. We are all based in agencies in North Texas, so I know when we start talking about heated agencies in West Texas or South Texas, or even we've got some people who come to the conference in the Northeast that present problems or policy that is foreign to us. So let us know, send us your policy, we'll spread them out and touch base with everybody. That we want to be a resource, like I keep saying. So if y'all do have questions like that we can let us know, we can post anonymously and everybody can kind of create this network to help each other out in that regard. Let's see, I want to talk about gear a little bit. We talked to Jamie. I told her I was going to put her on the spot about some firearm stuff. So we talked specifically about a drop holster, and apparently there's all different kinds. She started talking about shapes and
All kinds
scary
of
for me.
technical ones.
But Jamie, why, if you were on the ring with a female and she was having trouble drawing, tell us what some modifications that could be a possibility, and specifically the drop holster, how that helps.
So the biggest issue I see with females when it comes to drawing from the holster is the holster, the gun locking up in the holster. And that's just the angle that they're able to reach at it as when their hand comes down. A lot of females are high-waisted, a lot of it, just any high-waisted individual, female or not. So if you have a short torso and you're high-waisted and your arms are still long, when you drive your hand down to get a good grip on the gun to draw it out of the holster, it's just impossible when it sits level and equal with your belt. So the first thing that I do, if that's the gear that they're issued, that's the gear that they're running, is we talk about modifying your actual draw stroke, which is just simply you can blade your body over to open up your side, which allows your hand to fit directly on your gun, or a drop shank. And all that is the actual leather or plastic piece that attaches the holster to the gun belt. You can get different sizes. You can have a high rise, and that's for real long torso people that'll actually sit higher than most safari line holsters, which most agencies are running. They pretty much standard come with what they call the mid-rise shank, and then you have a drop shank, which all that does is allow it to sit at pretty much about the bottom edge of your gun belt, which allows you to have a better master grip on the gun when you're coming to draw out. So there's all different kinds of gear out there. It's just what problem are you having? And it could also just come from the mechanics too. So, but there are ways to fix it. There's gear to fix it. If you work for an agency that you were issued this gear, you will carry this gear, and you're having some of these kind of issues, shoot me a message and we'll work through it. There's tons of techniques to bypass some of the stuff without having to change gear. I'm a firm believer, if you have this gear and you've trained and rep with this gear, don't go changing it if you don't expect to put that same amount of training and reps into it. Especially when it comes to something as trying to get your gun out of your holster quickly in a dead war situation. You don't want to be jacked with the reps and the muscle memory that we have on that piece of gear. So just be mindful if you're switching gear out, train it.
Do you have another question? Okay, go ahead.
Here, it's coming in.
Oh.
I'm sending it to you.
Oh.
Yay.
Stand by. Good one. All right. Oliver Reed. Can you talk about how to get noticed through promotions better as a female? She works in a small department, only about 60 sworn, and it's very male oriented. So I guess she wants to know what she can do to put herself out there and be more noticeable by superiors, I'm assuming, when it comes to promotionals. I have a, if you want to take a minute.
Yeah.
Your thoughts.
No, go ahead.
Something-
Well, I was just thinking of something that I don't know if I should say.
Something we always talk about is find a place at the table and find something to say. Be heard, don't just talk and say
Yes.
anything. But find a way to be in the meeting, be in the rooms, literally, physically sit at the table, don't stand in the corner. And find something to say, something to interject. If you don't have anything to say, I think you probably need to take a couple steps back then and work on your education and experience and make sure that you're in a position where you can offer something to the meeting. But I think speaking up and making yourself known.
I think maybe
putting yourself out there is the biggest thing. It's the scariest thing too. So don't get me wrong, it's not easy for some folks. It wasn't even really easy for me, believe it or not. But I've kind of owned that, but, no, honestly, you gotta put yourself out there and you gotta, just like you said, get a seat at the table. Find positions where you can have valuable input, and the best way to do that is to educate yourself on whatever it is that you know you're about to walk into. So educate yourself on whatever, if you want to be a field training officer, educate yourself on what is expected of that person, so that when you go for that interview to be a FTO, that again, you're above any of the other candidates. And the only way I know how to do that is to go in there with confidence, learn what it is that you're about to reach out for, educate yourself, and when they point at you to say something, say something. Make it count. Realize that they're pointing at you because they want to know what your input is, not just because you're sitting there. So make sure you show your worth by educating yourself on things.
Well, and be careful. Don't just say something, say something.
Right.
Because then you're looked at as annoying as opposed to being, well, I mean, sure, if you're just putting stuff out there, just to put it out there,
Yeah.
it's really not gonna benefit you. So researching, making sure you're knowledgeable before you open up your mouth is really important. Shirley Chisholm, who was one of the first Black women to be in Congress, she said, when there wasn't a seat at the table, she carried a folding chair.
Yeah.
That's what you need to do sometimes, is you gotta take the folding chair. You gotta say, I'm coming.
Right.
But be very careful how you do that, because you don't wanna be the annoyance. You wanna be a knowledgeable person who's got input.
I would throw it out there too, if it's a smaller agency that's probably more control-based, that, do your job and don't be afraid to volunteer for crap details.
Yep.
And don't complain, don't be blinded about it. Don't be the person that's always the backup officer, be the one who's not afraid to take the lead on a call. Because what I see is people who put in for specialized units later, nobody knows them because they're a ghost in patrol.
Right.
They just do their, they do their shift, and that's it. And they don't get noticed because they don't do anything. So be that person, like, I need somebody to guard this rock all night long. Sergeant, I'll do it. That kind of thing. That,
Be available.
One thing too, something I'm passionate about is formal education. I think there's a place for policing, but I think you have to invest in yourself. So whether it's formal education, getting your bachelor's or your master's or certain special certifications, or going to specialized trainings like ours or other ones. If you're not a good shot, go find Jamie, go to the training, do things like that, but you can't sit around and wait on somebody else to put you in a better position.
Your dedication when it comes to your qualification shows commitment, shows perseverance, and shows that you have the ability to think, your ability to follow things through. And you and I had some conversation about me going back to my master's. So you finally did that, right? And man, this weekend was tough for me. But you've got to fight through it, because the reality is I'm trying to show my commitment and show my worth. And one of the ways to do that is your formal education. No doubt.
And ultimately, especially at smaller departments, at least that I've seen and people I've talked to, that will set you apart. If you can go to, I know a board when I was promoting to sergeant and putting in for something that set me apart, I was very fortunate to have the opportunity to go to leadership training and stuff like that. Partly because I have a chief who was invested in it and backed me, but a lot because I went, I want to go to this one, this is the date, this is how much it is, can we go? And I was harassing. So, it's out there, but you can't sit and wait for somebody to hand it to you. Do we have any more questions, Carissa? Well, we're kind of winding down, a little over an hour here, we've been chatting. Does anybody have anything that you wanted to get out there that didn't really have an opportunity to?
No, the only thing we've got, I think, as a group collectively, is to hold on to your hats for 2021, because we are coming. And it's gonna be good. I promise you that.
Let us know. We've already started planning this year. We're going to move to a different format and hopefully offer some more courses and classes so that classes will be less full. Everybody can get a little taste of the pie. If there's something that you want to see in 2021, let us know now, because we're already starting to plan. Tiffany is on the planning committee. We're about to call them back after giving them a hiatus because 2020 kicked us in the butt. But we're back at it. We want to know what y'all want to see. what instructors you wanna see come back. And we're gonna be here in Fort Worth, hopefully.
I got another
Dates
question.
soon.
What's
And
the
we've got
question?
one more question.
What are some classes to put in for that are beneficial for promotion?
That was on my question thing we didn't get to, so.
Leadership classes.
There you go.
Leadership classes.
What was the phrase that the chief used? Oh, when we were talking, he said leadership is something agnostic, gender agnostic.
Yes,
So-
Richard.
Having said that, there's a lot of good female-specific leadership classes. The Women's Leadership Institute is offered through ISCP. It's a 40-hour course. It is phenomenal. A lot of us up here have been to it. FLETC offers a
That's the best one.
40-hour Women in Leadership course, but also go to the Generalized ILEA.
Yes.
Puts on
Yes.
some leadership courses. The good thing about COVID, you ready? Hold your hats. There is something good. There is a ton of online
Yes.
webinars, and they're like $30-40. You can sit for 2 hours and get content that normally you gotta go somewhere for.
One of the things I would tell them to look into too is anything on servant leadership. Now, I'm the only one that harps on and believes in that, but that is some good leadership qualities for any leader to go to if you want to be effective. So those are things that I think there's a couple of online programs that are out there right now. I know ILEA has a servant leadership school and things like that, so.
FBI Leah is also.
Yeah, they don't have to be gender specific, but leadership in general.
Yeah.
But women's leadership really is very helpful because you get the networking.
Yes.
Absolutely.
The other thing is read. Don't
That's what I was
just,
gonna say.
yeah, do not just go to classes, read about leadership. There are so many wonderful books out there that talk about different styles and then find out what style works for you. And then read about that and
When
practice
I
that.
first promoted to sergeant, I wanted to be the best sergeant I could be. And I read, I don't know how much more it was. I stayed up all night reading books, John Maxwell, you name it, and I read. And it was very worthy, very worthy.
And podcasts, I know Melissa and I talked about that, I'm more of an audio person, so I listen to a lot of books, but I also listen to a lot of podcasts. There's a lot out there on leadership, there's a lot of police, podcasts too, that talk about kind of, what is it, Monday morning quarterbacking, and talking about things, current events that are going on and stuff, so, just soak everything in, that's what I would say. We, Carrie and I are on a board with TPCA, the Texas Police Chiefs Association, and we're developing a mentoring program that was supposed to already be happening. But again, it's the COVID, so it's coming, and part of that, the curriculum with it is gonna, kind of have a list of a lot of these classes and books and things like that. So go on your social media, your Facebook and stuff like that, and look at these, female-specific groups, but also just the Texas LEO groups, and ask, and people will give you, you'll be inundated with classes and class reviews, and this one was good, this one sucked, so which Melissa and I had to talk about what she was going to, she was like, it's not really worth your time. And so that's also good to know, is you have a lot of stuff,
Absolutely.
and so maybe we'll get and publish this of the classes. I know at our department, Carrie has a spreadsheet for all the female officers of classes that she wants
It's
us to
getting
go
bigger,
to.
so that's good.
Right? A lot of them are leadership based. I know that's something we always offer at our conference, at least one leadership class. And then obviously our speakers are usually somebody that hits on leadership specific things too. So just soak up everything that you can. Is there anything else?
No.
All right. Anybody?
Sure.
Not yet.
Okay. Anybody else have anything to add?
No, we will see.
Thanks for listening.
Yeah, thanks for listening. Comments 2021. We'll be here and there will be more people.
So bad, my leg.
Wait.
Stretching and moving.
Knock it off.
No.
Oh.